Let's get started. Welcome all. Welcome to tonight's InfoCast. It's hosted by the Winchester Town Meeting Members Association. I'm Lance Grensbeck. I serve as chair of the TMMA. With me tonight is Carol Savage, our vice president and chief expert Zoom wrangler. So thank you, Carol. The topic of tonight's session is WinCAM, which is Winchester's nonprofit public access and media corporation. WinCAM plays a vital role in Winchester's civic life through broadcasts of town meeting sessions, coverage of town board and committee meetings, and local community programming. WinCAM is facing significant financial challenges tied to declining cable franchise revenue, rising operating costs, and uncertainty about future funding. May also be forced to leave its current studio space, from which we're using tonight, raising broader concerns about the future of local public access programming in Winchester. Our guests tonight are David Gauthier, WinCAM's executive director, and Sean Makanuko, the president of WinCAM's board of directors. They will be talking about the pressures facing WinCAM, the potential impact on WinCAM's programming and operations, state legislative initiatives to secure additional funding, and ways residents and town meeting members can help support WinCAM. Now, most of you are familiar with the TMMA, but let me quickly remind you, for the lawyers, that WinCAM is an association of town meeting members. It is not an arm of town government nor an arm of town meeting. And as such, we do not vote on or take positions on town issues or articles before town meeting as an association. Our goals are to improve communication between the town hall and town meeting, and particularly among town meeting members. In addition to these InfoCasts, we publish the bulletin, which carries updates from town boards and committees, and we host a forum, an online discussion board where town meeting members can post questions, comments, and information about town issues and articles before town meeting. We will be recording this InfoCast and posting the recording to the forum and the TMMA's YouTube channels. We will also provide the recording to WinCAM for broadcast. So if you can't stay for tonight's whole session, you're welcome to watch the late night reruns. And you can watch it as many times as you like. Dave will be quite enthused about that. We've not posted that, but we will try to. If you'd like copies of Dave's slides from tonight's presentations, which, as I recall, have a lot of good information on them, you can download. We'll try to put that in the chat box as we get there. If you have questions during the presentation, which will run about 20 minutes, I think, type them in the chat window as you think of them. We will read them out during the Q&A session, and then we'll open the floor for any questions. And although we'd like to nominally close around 8 p.m., Dave said he's willing to stay as late as you like. So with that, Dave or Sean, I don't know which one of you is likely to lead off, but welcome.
I think I'll go first.
We're just here for moral support.
Thank you, Sean.
Yes.
So thank you to Lance and to Carol and to the entire TMMA and really all of town meeting for their support. We've had a lot of support we recently hosted a meeting, as many of you know, of the chairs of town meeting here, and Winchester News was here, and because of that, we got a lot of word out there about what's happening with WinCAM and its funding. So I'd like to start sort of at the beginning. I have a presentation that I had made to our board relatively recently. And I changed it a bit for the chairs meeting. So I apologize to those who have already seen it, but I think it's pretty important for folks to see and hear about what WinCAM does, how we get our funding, and just sort of start back at the beginning. So this is just an overview, and I'll run through it really quickly, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions. So if you can picture for a moment a world where you didn't carry a cell phone and a computer and a video camera in your pocket, and 1970s, right? Some of us remember those days. The Federal Cable Act was put together and then renewed in 1984. And as part of that, some really forward-thinking individuals had the idea of tying people together using this new technology. So far before the internet came along, it was cable that was really the new technology, and this promised to bring communities and people together in a certain way. And part of that was that people thought that this was a great way for people to access technology. And that's where public access television was really born out of that. So the idea was that anybody who lives in a certain area should be able to access technology. And the best part of it was, well, the cable companies are going to pay for it. And the reason why is because they're selling product over the public rights of way. Telephone poles, underground conduits, all that stuff is stuck in public land. So they owe the municipality, in the case of Massachusetts, a place like WinCAM. So Massachusetts, by the way, has the highest concentration of community media centers in the country because of that local franchising. Not many other states have local franchising where Comcast and Verizon and Charter and all these different cable companies need to negotiate contracts at a local level. Most of the states do it at a statewide level, but in Massachusetts, it's still local, which is great. It's a great benefit. So the rule is that up to 5% of the cable company's gross annual revenue within any municipality in Massachusetts goes back to the town. The town, the way that they handle their public educational and government access is sort of up to the municipality. They can have a separate private nonprofit like WinCAM who can run the public education and government. They could make it a town department. About 25% of Massachusetts community media centers are town departments. And sometimes they split them, right? So the government channel might be a town department. Maybe the school department holds the education channel, and there might be a private nonprofit that handles the public. Here in Winchester, WinCAM does all three of those arms. So all of the money that is collected from those franchise fees comes to WinCAM, which is great. But as you can imagine, this isn't the greatest time in the world to be tied to cable subscriptions. Cable subscriptions have gone down statewide over 50% in the last 10 years, and here in Winchester about 40%. And although the funding isn't necessarily following that trend because the prices keep going up, so the percentage kept us afloat for a few years, but the funding is starting to go down, and that's a national problem. It's not just a Winchester problem, it's happening everywhere, but especially here in Massachusetts where there's such a high concentration of media centers. The way that town meeting is involved here in Winchester is an interesting story. Very quickly, the cable companies used to send payments directly to WinCAM. We used to get checks quarterly. And we would go and we would deposit them and we'd be on our merry way. Someone about 10 years ago at the Department of Revenue decided that they didn't like this practice, that a place like WinCAM was not party to the agreement between the town of Winchester and the cable company. And because the law that followed that, Mass General Law, chapter whatever, says the word appropriated, now it has to go through, for a town meeting approval. So that's why you see town meeting, you see every town meeting session or every time in fall and spring, there's an article to approve WinCAM's funding. And that's basically emptying the fund. It's money's just sitting there collecting with the town, and then it gets moved over to WinCAM. That was problematic for us because, we were used to getting funding 4 times a year. Now it's 2 times a year. And, so we often find ourselves a little bit worried as town meeting approaches that we're running pretty low. And then we, it's pretty good. It's usually pretty easy after that, but it's not the greatest situation. I want to cover a little bit of WinCAM by the numbers here. We have 4 cable channels. We have the public, the education, the government, and the HD. The HD is sort of a catch-all, right? So those 3, public, education, and government, are standard definition channels. Raise your hand if you still watch standard definition cable. And I know that there probably aren't any hands raised out there because nobody really, unless you're looking for something specific, you're not going to go to, the few of you who actually do have cable, you're not really spending a lot of time with channel 8 or channel 9 or channel 22. You're up in the HD tier. The problem with the HD on both Comcast and Verizon here in Winchester is they're way up in the thousands, right? So our Verizon HD channel is 2,136. So I guess you have to push that into your remote in order to access the HD channel here in Winchester. It's not something that you'd fall upon, right? That used to be a thing too, right? You used to do channel surfing, right? Everybody remembers that term. When you just sort of flip through the channels and you go, hey, I know that person. Oh my God, I can't believe my neighbor is on TV on public access. And that really helped with getting the word about what we do. We don't have that factor anymore. So we've needed to sort of diversify what we do. So you can see down here, we do offer 2 online programming outlets. Everything that we run on cable is also streaming on our website 24/7, right? So if you didn't have cable, you could still watch WinCAM in a traditional way, where, sort of that's the difference between, traditional television, where you, as the programmer, decide when the content is shown. That is sort of flip-flopped over the years, and streaming is more of an on-demand experience now, and you as the viewer decide when you'd like to watch something. We also keep a very active YouTube page. We've been doing a lot more with YouTube Live in the last couple of years. That's where most people are, and so we try to get there as much as we can. We are a private nonprofit with 9 resident board members. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention for Sean that we are in the process of looking for some interested people to join our board. Specifically, we're looking for a board treasurer. So if you're interested in serving with us, please reach out. There are only 4 staff members at WinCAM, 2 of them being full-time, me being one of those 2. That's usually a stat that people are pretty surprised at, because of the amount of coverage that we are able to pull off around the town. We do have a pretty handy and dedicated stable of volunteers who help us out. Maybe you saw some of them around Town Day on Saturday. But if you saw us on Friday night at the graduation, that was all hands on deck, and that was a full staff production. There are certain things that we feel as a staff we have to take ownership of. Town meeting and municipal meetings. We feel as though those are really, really important things, and we have to make sure that there is a staff member there. But it's difficult because you'll see in a little while. We currently have about 95 members. They're all, you have to either live or work in Winchester to be a member. So those are all residents. And we are receiving 5%, which is, again, that federal maximum from both cable providers. So there's no way to go in and negotiate more money from the cable company. We're maxed out right now. And just another number that I thought was interesting, and I presented this to the board the other night too. We are averaging in 2026 17 live programs per month, which I think is pretty impressive, right? So if you think about we're typically closed on the weekends, right? So I mean, if you usually have about 20 weeknights, we're live on 17 of them. That's pretty good. So let's talk about the finances. Without a change to the funding model, WinCAM will continue to lose money year after year, and that's a problem. The high point in cable franchise funding was 2017. It's just been going down since then. It was a little bit of an uptick in 2020, and that was because that Comcast figure was about 4.75% and went up to 5%, right? So we got there was one year where it slightly went up, and now it's just been trending downward. WinCAM has taken operational losses the last couple of years. And that's obviously not something that's sustainable. We can't continue to do that. And so if you break it all down, I mean, there are 2 things you can do. You can increase your revenue, or you can decrease your expenses. community media centers have been trying to crack the code of increased revenue for years, you know, and it's different municipalities can do different things. I know a town like Wilmington does a lot of sponsorships. They've also got a really robust commercial base in Wilmington that Winchester doesn't necessarily share. You know, we do a little bit better with private donations. Some folks are doing production services. Well, I mean, that's great, but if everyone was doing production services, now we're competing with each other. Now competing with Stoneham and Woburn and all, you know, it's not going to work that way. Some people are even starting to monetize their online content, which to me is sort of counter to the mission of the organization. So it would be like the last thing that I would want to do. As far as the expenses go, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more in detail, you know, personnel related costs, about 62% of our funding. That's our operational budget, and that includes everything, the salaries, the taxes, and the health insurance. The other big one is the facility expense, and Lance alluded to this at the beginning. Utilities, snow removal, housekeeping, all of that stuff is, as well as the rent, make up about 25%. So those two costs is almost 90% of our operating budget year to year. So you can understand that we don't have this big fat budget where you know, we can just trim a few things here and there. I've been doing that for several years now, and we've gotten to sort of a crucial point. Here's a closer look at the actual budget, and that's this fiscal year, which is just about over. And you know, you can see sort of the pie there that you know, most of that is personnel related, and I would say, you know, we're pretty short staffed at this point, you know. It's difficult to find good help, you know, especially if you're only offering part-time work. You know, I typically can only hire people who are freshly out of college that are looking for their first job. They find something better and, you know, with more hours and more benefits and those kinds of things, and they're usually off. So a lot of my time is spent in getting new people up to speed and doing all that. It's hard to retain people. And then the facility expense is really the other one. And these colors aren't necessarily matching up on my screen, so I hope that they are for you. You know, facility expenses is the other big part of it. And we really enjoy the facility here. We have been here since 2013. When we first moved over here, we occupied just the other side over there. Many of you will probably remember Franny's Restaurant, little diner. We'd be sitting right in the middle of their dining room at this point if they were still here. When Franny wanted to retire, he didn't have anybody to take over the business, and so they closed shop. And the property owners wanted to know if we wanted to move in. We thought it was a great opportunity, right? We'll build this great multi-purpose space, and we'll have community space, and it'll be great. And people will come in and rent it. And then we had a global pandemic, and it really kind of put a damper on everything. So we never really recovered from that. You know, we do a good amount of rentals at this point, but it's not enough to really make a dent in what we've got to do. So you can see now where we are, where we've got some difficult decisions to make. If you are decreasing personnel, it's my estimation that a personnel is directly tied to services. So if you need to cut back on people, you need to cut back on services. And then we don't want to do that because obviously this is, you know, we are an organization that really is deeply dependent upon word of mouth and being able to serve people and tell people, yes, you can do that, or yes, we can be there. We don't want to say, no, we can't do that, or we can't do that thing anymore that you used to enjoy watching. We can't do that anymore. We can't afford to do that. If you're dialing that kind of stuff back, you're not really relevant within the town, and that's sort of a death knell for you. So personnel is really the last thing that we want to cut. Although, as recently as 2024, WinCAM did have 3 full-time employees, but has already cut back from, 3.5 full-time equivalent to 3. And so we're sort of at our minimum at this point, any cut to personnel, it negatively affects the facility. Like if I need to take a day off, I need to make sure somebody's here in case a member wants to come in and do something. And sometimes that's difficult because the part-time employees that I have, they have to have other jobs in order to supplement their income, right? So maybe they're not available to come in. So, one problem sort of leads into the next. Cutting back on our facility seems like one option that we could do. Our current lease is at our Swanton Street facility is up in September. I don't think it's telling tales out of school to say that, we want to stay here. The property owners want us to stay here too. They've been kind enough to offer us a 1-year lease. That was a request that I had made, a shorter term, because we are just so up in the air with our funding. They've honored that. We want to stay here. We really, we don't want to incur the cost of actually moving. And we really think that since we've been here, we've been able to grow as an organization too. Many of you probably remember years and years ago when we were tucked into the back of the old high school. No one knew where we were or what we were. Since we've had this sort of storefront location, people drive by, go into the transfer station, those kinds of things. A lot of people are utilizing the facility. We get a lot of people in and out the door. If you can see behind me, the beautiful photos on the wall, a satellite gallery of the Griffin Museum of Photography. We're working with the Network for Social Justice and many other organizations, including town meeting members association quite often. So we're hoping that we're able to stay here, but it's not something that's sustainable long term if we're going to continue to take operational losses. Supplemental income from the town was on the table for the operational override that failed back in March. So that sort of accelerated our timeline. We looked at it as if this passes and we are able to get some supplemental funding from the town, that's terrific. It'll buy us some time. But really when that didn't pass, we were really forced into making some difficult decisions and trying to do them on a much more accelerated basis. I'll talk to you a little bit more about the state legislation. So there are advocacy agencies both nationally and statewide for community media centers. And I've been involved with both of them, but mostly on the statewide board for many, many years. And I'm currently the legislative chair. So I've been sort of spearheading this effort. And the whole point of it is it's an act to modernize funding for community media programming. It's filed in both the House and the Senate. And what we're saying is streaming companies like Hulu or Amazon Prime or Netflix, any of them, are using the exact same infrastructure as cable has traditionally. They use the public rights of way. They go into your house, they're selling their product over those rights of way, and they pay nothing. They don't even pay sales taxes. They don't have to report how much they make to the state. It is a case of the industry and technology moving faster than lawmaking, right? So there's no regulation for streaming companies. There are at least 20 other states in the union who are at least collecting sales tax on digital goods, including streaming. Massachusetts is not one of them, right? So you often hear the term cord cutting, or maybe you've actually used that term. Well, I cut the cord. Well, you really did, right? I mean, the cord remains exactly the same. No one came to your house and cut anything. You just stopped paying for cable. Now you're watching your Disney Plus every night, but the infrastructure is exactly the same, right? So we've been trying to make that point up at Beacon Hill now. We are in our 3rd full session. There was a partial session before that. And we've made some pretty decent progress. We've got favorable recommendations out of our joint committee assignment in the last two sessions. And we've got broad support from both the House and the Senate. So we are trying to find a path to the floor at this point. The most recent effort has us trying to get the bill attached to the governor's economic development bill. We think it's an appropriate place for it. We might even try to package it with other like bills. One that would change some of the rules for that fund that I spoke to about earlier. It would allow the town to set up a revolving fund rather than it having to go in front of town meeting. It would just go straight to the town. The town could then cut us a check and eliminate town meeting. No offense. And maybe there's an unfunded mandate out there. There are several lawmakers who are trying to make it mandated that you have to have hybrid coverage for any municipal meeting. We think that's great, right? That's an accessibility issue. But you're sticking a mandate onto towns without giving them any money. And I'm raising my hand going, oh, well, I've got an idea. How about you do this? So that's something that we're working on. We don't think we're going to get any help from the federal government anytime soon. No one has specifically passed legislation that aids community media in this way yet. The state of Vermont has money in their budget every year for community media, over $1 million, which is great, but they have 24 outlets in the entire state. $1 million wouldn't go very far if you're dividing that by 250 here in the Commonwealth. So it would have to be a much bigger one. So we're looking at all of those different mechanisms. We're hoping that we get something across, but what many people are doing also are turning back to the municipality. And that is the problem that I foresee. I don't think you can go backward. Is Winchester, if WinCAM disappeared tomorrow, and if the federal government had their way, we'd be gone. They're trying to deregulate cable, they're physically trying to remove regulations, franchise fees entirely. If we were gone tomorrow, is Winchester going to stop live streaming town meeting or select board meetings, or is no one going to cover high school football games or anything like that? No, of course you're going to find a way, right? What happens when the town incurs costs that they don't expect, right? And that's the issue that people are always raising. Opponents of our bill are saying, well, you're going to make the streaming more expensive. Just because cable defers that cost back to the subscriber doesn't mean the streaming companies have to or will. But if the town of Winchester now suddenly has to, fund all of these efforts, what's going to happen? The taxes are going to go up. Those are not quite as, optional as your many, many streaming services. So that's where we're looking. The board here at WinCAM, we have recently, sort of revamped our committee structure, and we're working very hard. We've got a facility committee that's working on the different options that we have for a facility, both short-term and long-term. We've got a revenue committee trying to get ourselves better at fundraising. We were not a traditional fundraising organization. We just weren't. We had a steady stream of income. There were many other Winchester nonprofits who needed money a lot more than we did, so we weren't out there being really aggressive. So we needed to change that, and we're trying very hard to do that. And we have what we're calling documentation or documents committee, where mostly Sean and I are looking at our mission. Right? Is our mission that was written in 2001 or 2000, is it still the same? Are we still trying to do the same things? Or do we need to change that? We're thinking about adding a vision statement to that too, along with the bylaws and the policies and procedures and the employee handbook and all the other stuff that we've got there. So these are the things that we're trying to do, getting together. We have some really great dedicated volunteer board members here, and that's saying a lot because, you know, at least I get paid to be here. Sean doesn't, so good for her. So I'm gonna skip this one and just escape for a second and stop sharing because, and I will talk a little bit about our, you know, it's no secret that, you know, we were talking to the town about a possible move to the Parkhurst School. We've got, some numbers on that, you know, but there are some issues there, right? You know, one of the things that I already talked about is the fact that we are so visible here. We've got high school kids that we've got one high school kid who will sprint over here during his lunch hour to do his editing sometimes, and then he sprints right back. So having proximity to the high school and to town hall and to, you know, everything down here is really, really important for us. We wouldn't have that same kind of accessibility up at the Parkhurst. But what we would have at the Parkhurst is the ability to stop the bleeding, so to speak. So that's really pretty much the whole presentation. I didn't look much at my notes, so hopefully I know all this by heart. Maybe I'll go to Lance and Carol and just kick it back over to you. And how do you want to handle it?
Okay, well, because nobody's put any difficult questions in the chat, so
No?
what we'll do is open the floor to people online. I think if you know, press the raise your hand button or wave at us. And here's your opportunity to ask all the difficult, embarrassing questions that you've been waiting to hear for some years. Any volunteers out there? Questions about future funding opportunities, questions about how it affects
You want to raise your hand?
different civics groups.
Vince, did you have a question, Vince?
Yeah, open it. It's open.
Go ahead,
Yes,
Vince.
Vince Dixon, Precinct 3. For some, you may know, I've been doing a show on history and civics. And ultimately, this comes back to how much do you pay for a free press? Kind of ironic. But the early development of Massachusetts in the 16 and Pennsylvania in the 1700s involved media. Printed media, at times scratchy and filled with spelling mistakes, but it conveyed information. And during the Patriot period, often 3, 4, 5 different competing rags, literally, printed on rags, that sorted out. When my father was growing up in Boston, he said there were 8 or 9 different newspapers. Yes, they'd collected advertising. We do have the Winchester News, which has saved some of our information, some advertising. Maybe we have to figure out something that is a Winchester Information Collaborative, taking the different pieces like Winchester News and the Community Bulletin Board and others in a mixed mode, and go back and look at BBC and CBC and see how it is that they had both public funding and private individual interest. Be willing to help. Maybe we could get Harvard or Bentley, it's entrepreneurial, some others involved. But there's some thoughts out there on the table, and ultimately perhaps even a tax credit. If the legislature can be told, hey, if a business actually has a tax credit for promoting their business and helping the public interest, maybe there's a community of interest there, because without it, we are going to lose the democracy that we are so concerned about. If we just go black and not Men in Black.
There are two things that, from your statement, Vince, first of all, and thank you, that I'd like to just sort of jump off on. You know, the first one is the transparency in government. I think that's a huge thing, that community media as a whole is able to do, right? It's gavel to gavel. There's no opinion there. This is what happened. We're bringing it to you as it happened, right? And it's, you know, so that's a really important thing that we would lose. The other thing is that we've learned this lesson, at least I hope, Well, we saw how many newspapers there were. Winchester had, when I first started working here 15 years ago, Winchester had two local papers, right? And now there's none, right? Everybody had a local paper. The local news just shrank and shrank and shrank and shrank. And it's really sort of the same thing. It's technology that is changing. It's technology that spawned an idea like community media, but it's technology that threatens it too, which I find ironic. It's just changing technology. And people think, okay, well, why do I need to go to the community media center? I have a video camera right here. I can press a couple of buttons and I can have a worldwide audience. Why do I want to just limit myself to television in Winchester? Well, there are things that we can offer that you can't find on YouTube or watching a free tutorial. We may not have that if we have to move our facility. I think about the production studio down at the end of the hall. The expertise of the staff who's able to answer your questions and help you along that journey of developing a program and shooting those videos and helping you along and reaching your goals, your production goals. But I think it would be a shame if people viewed this as, and I know some people do, as a relic of the past. This is something that we don't need anymore. I would argue, and not just because I'm gainfully employed in the industry, I think it still has a place, and I think it will for a long time.
Amy had a question for you, Dave. She said, are there models where community media organizations share facilities or operations while maintaining local programming? We've seen pressure for police and fire to share. Is that a model that works in Massachusetts or in Winchester?
There are examples.
Are there cost savings or revenue gains to be realized?
Yeah, you see that quite often. There are regional centers. There are quite a few. Plymouth area, they share with Duxbury and Kingston and a bunch of different ones. Up on the North Shore, Gloucester shares an access center with Essex and Manchester by the Sea and one other municipality up there. So it's not unheard of. But it is, and it's something that we as community media professionals talk about. Do we regionalize a little bit more? And I think it's a good idea, but it's also a stopgap solution, right? So if we decided to pool all our resources together with Stoneham and Woburn and I don't know, Wakefield, right? How do you decide where you move to? And is that accessible for your members to get, now those high school students that are used to coming here at lunchtime, they can't get over to Wakefield to the facility, so you become less accessible. And that 5% of funding is just going to keep going down, right? Whether maybe you regionalize for a while and you've solved the issue for another 8 to 10 years, but eventually that's all going to come due if something doesn't change.
I think Daniel Nakamoto asked, what is the current operational shortfall? Or right now, what's the shortfall and what's the trend, I guess?
Yeah, well, in the last fiscal year, WinCAM had an operational loss of about $50,000, and this year it'll be 70 or 80. And you say, well, that's not a ton of money, but the entire operational budget is about $425,000 a year, so it's a pretty good chunk of it, and it's only getting wider. It's only going to continue to get wider. We have sort of seen a little bit of leveling off. There are plenty of people who are, and I know I don't want to say it's everybody of a certain age, but it is for the most part, for older adults like me who still have cable, they're probably not going to get rid of it anytime soon. I don't think that streaming is a better experience. Most certainly, it's just more cost effective. I like being able to watch, hockey and basketball sort of at the same time and flip back and forth. That's really, that's a difficult experience if you're just streaming these different platforms.
Let's go to Pam.
Pam, do you had your hand up? You had a comment?
I do. I have a comment and a question. First, I want to thank Dave and WinCAM for the vital service that they provide this community. And I don't know if people realize how much you do, how many meetings you record, and the availability to the community. You offer an essential service that I am so grateful for. And I watch it on cable, I stream, I watch it live streaming sometimes, depending on where I am. It's fantastic. And whatever I can do in my position as a town meeting member and a community member to help maintain WinCam in town, I will do, and hopefully others will too. So, and I'm going to apologize because part of this I watched when we were on the road, and it was coming in and out. So it may have been mentioned already, and if it has, my apologies. But I'm curious about what kind of fundraising and grant writing and those kinds of things are being thought about, and what kind of support would you like from us as town meeting members and members of the community in terms of those kinds of money raising endeavors?
Well, first, thank you for all the kind words, Pam. Really appreciate it. And no, we didn't talk in great detail about the fundraising. Again, we are in that process of sort of changing our mindset here. So a few things that we've come up with that we're needing to renew our efforts to create content that is that we can share. So for example, I created a quick 30-second video of me asking for donations just last week to update some of the stuff that we have. We're trying to do that with a couple of different faces from town. We're gonna get Sean to do one, you know, because she loves being in front of the camera. Maybe we'll ask some of you folks to be on some of those as well. So utilizing our own channels to make people aware of our financial situation and ask if they go in and donate. We're also looking. We're in the very early stages at our meeting a couple of weeks ago. It was about a week ago. We had a fundraising meeting. We're looking to prioritize, and you know, there was a lot of ideas thrown out there on the table, but we're looking to prioritize and what we're going to try first. Personally, I like the idea of finding a local organization who might match, and we do sort of like a donation and then get it like a match campaign or something like that. So this is all something that we've been trying to do. And again, grant writing, it's usually for it's usually for pieces of equipment. Capital money isn't necessarily as much of a problem. There are capital grants written into both these contracts with Comcast and Verizon. Verizon has paid, Comcast gives us 20,000 a year on top of the franchise fees just for capital purchases. So the money for stuff is pretty good because we've taken a substantial amount of that and put it aside. You know, we put a lot of money into this facility, but you know, we've been able to raise our savings back up. So we've almost paid for that. It's really the operational stuff that you know, we have trouble with. And it's been my experience, in my limited experience, that you know, grant writing for operational causes is a little more tricky and a little more challenging than it is for capital purchases, but we're working on it.
Go back to Vince.
Other questions, Vince? You had your hand up, is that?
I just want to say thank you, Dave.
No, two things. One is you point to the fact that the electric and cable wires are on public ways. So a small minor fee based on that surely makes some sense. The other thing is that if you kind of look at the whole thing, public notices are legally required under the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Those legal notices go to a paper that's now dead or maybe not at all. And there has to be part of this whole thing saying to the legislature, it is important that you and your local cities and towns get legal notices so people are informed so they don't show up and say, my God, you already made a decision. I didn't know there was a meeting. Or that there's better publicity to that. So those are two things to suggest. I've written a lot of legislation, as some people know, and perhaps we can go a little further. I think, though individual bills have value, sometimes just throwing a bunch of different bills out there have value too, to see what will stick.
Absolutely, yeah, and appreciated, Vince. You know, with our bill being in its third session, if it doesn't get over the top in this session, I think we have to really circle back and, you know, strategize and figure out, you know, what the issue is. As we know, Massachusetts does not have necessarily high marks on its on the amount of bills that it passes annually or in every session. It's in fact in the bottom 10 of states as far as productivity goes. You know, every session. I'm always told that the legislature is, you know, it is slow by design, and it's intended to be that way. You know, so make sure that things are vetted. But we feel as though our bill is now vetted. I will mention too that Senator Jason Lewis, who is retiring, as you know, he has been our champion with this bill from the beginning. So he has been very, very supportive of it. I work with Representative Joan Moschino out of Hull, Massachusetts. She's been a terrific champion for us. We do have several friends in the legislature, but what's difficult is, you know, these bills are sitting both in front of both House and Senate Ways and Means, because we have a House bill and a Senate bill. They're exactly the same, but we just figure you got two bites at the apple doing it that way. It's sitting in front of Ways and Means with 1,000 other bills, right? And so one thing you can do as town meeting members is call Mike Day, is call Jason Lewis, is call Pat Jalen, or call Michelle Sicolo and say, would you mind, you know, checking in on this bill? Check in with House Ways and Means, check in with Senate Ways and Means, and just see where that bill is. We're trying to always keep it on the top.
Have they been debating the issues within the legislature, or is it not gone past staff level?
No, it's really not, because it's not. That's one of the issues that we have, Lance, and I think that this is a little bit problematic for us, and it's a reality check, right? As important as the work that we do is, we're not saving lives here, right? So this isn't healthcare, this isn't housing, you know, this isn't tax reform or anything like that. So there are always going to be higher priorities than community media. You would think it's an easy bill, right? This is for the public benefit. You would think that they'd just get that done. But, you know, there are folks on the other side. There are very high priced lobbyists and lawyers on the other side who don't want this to pass, and who get into the ear of legislators as well. So, you know, what I hear quite often at the end of a session is, you know, we just ran out of time. And that's frustrating. And I think that that's a bit of a cop out, but, you know, it's hard. It's hard to hear that, especially when I'm the guy who needs to turn around and tell 250 other community media outlets in Massachusetts that, sorry, you know, no one's coming to save us this year, you know.
We have a hand raised.
Dorothy, you had your hand raised, question or comment? You'll have to unmute yourself.
Oh, here, there I go. Now I know how to unmute. So this is perfect, because I was gonna ask if there had been any movement or progress with Mike Day on this. And you raise a really interesting question, which is, I mean, you raise a point that this is pretty straightforward, right? This is, you know, providing a community service. I mean, this isn't huge money, relatively speaking. Who is objecting to this? Who is opposed to this? You mentioned lobbyists. Like, to me, it seems like kind of a straight shooter, and I want to understand, how do we get Mike Day on board to sort of support these bills, or the bill that's in front of him?
Well, I think Mike is supportive. He doesn't co-sign on a lot of bills. So, but you know, if I have called him and asked him to come in here and do a PSA supporting it, he'll do it. You know, I've called him and asked him, you know, because I know he's close to leadership in the House, and I just say, what are you hearing? Can you get a bug in someone's ear? Because that's part of the game too, getting the attention of leadership. So much depends upon how the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate is feeling about a certain issue, or else it doesn't get done. So we're trying to tackle those as well. There hasn't been a ton of movement recently. I'm getting a little squirrely personally because we're getting closer to that end of formal session at the end of July. We're still working on that economic development bill. We're trying to find other pathways to the floor, whether it be packaging it with other bills, like I mentioned, or attaching it to another piece of legislation that's there's a bill out there for like government services. I don't remember exactly what it's called. And I pointed that one out to our lobbyists and I said, hey, can we attach it to that? And she said, well, it's not going anywhere. So let's not bother, so you've got to get lucky. It's about timing and luck and finding the right vehicle and finding that path to the floor. And that's again frustrating because I would just like to be on the floor. It's the streaming companies who don't want to pay for it, Dorothy. They just don't. They say, well, you know what? We don't have to pay for it and you can't make us. And that's what, that's the attitude that they have. I think, they look at it like, well, they aren't charging anything different for a Netflix subscription that I know of in the state of Florida than they are in the state of Massachusetts, even though Florida charges sales tax on them. So the argument that's made that it's going to cost residents more money, that they're just going to pass that cost off, it's a fallacy. It's not going to cost people extra money. And if it does, it's because Netflix and Hulu and all of them are just going to raise their prices at some point anyway.
That was my next question, was like, what is happening in other states with these streaming services?
Nothing. There are several other states who are trying to do similar types of legislation. Maine, New York, some other states. California is doing something relatively close to what Vermont is doing as far as trying to get some money put into the budget. All states are different, and that's one of the first questions that state legislators will ask me. Well, what are other states doing? Well, no one's really doing it, but no one does community media like Massachusetts does. Like I said, 250 community media outlets. The only states with more than 100 are California and Texas. Those are states with 4 to 5 times the population of Massachusetts. So it really, if it's going to happen, it has to happen here. And I think that that's another reason why the streaming companies push back too, because they know if it happens in Massachusetts, there goes the first domino. It's going to happen nationwide, and they're going to be on the hook for all of this, and it's going to hurt their bottom line.
Yeah, Carol was reminding me, we invited Dave in to talk to the precinct chairs a couple of weeks ago. And that conversation carried back to our board meeting more recently. And I think the board members felt pretty strongly that having access to WinCAM and having the access provides, I think we sent out a letter to the chairs of the Economic Development and Emerging Technologies Group. But I think the core thing that people on our board looked at was, they said, and I'll read our article, this is, in an era when news and information about government policies, programs, and regulations are delivered through increasingly siloed and partisan communication channels, it's vital that our town meeting representatives and residents see and hear directly about the work of their local government. And it's WinCAM that provides that essential channel. Winchester News is beginning to reestablish itself as a sort of an online print version of that. But I think there's, given the unique value and the role of town meeting in governance in Massachusetts and in Winchester, having the sessions broadcast, having board hearings and other things broadcast is pretty critical to the way we govern ourselves in this town. And I think our board agreed pretty strongly with that. So we can recycle our comments to Mike Day and everybody else. We should probably figure out, we'll send that tomorrow, do that. But
well, let me also mention, Lance, if you recall, during the pandemic, town meeting was run right out of this room that we're sitting in right now, right?
Yeah.
So
Right.
not to sort of, pat ourselves on the back, but if we weren't able to figure that out, if we didn't have the relationship that we have with the town and with town meeting and with all of the residents, because everybody here is really, really supportive, and it does make my job slightly easier, which is great, but you can't just halt things, right? All of your government couldn't just stop, right? So we were able to play an important part of that, but that really did change the expectation level too, right? The way it was all set up and the way that it was supposed to work is that the staff itself were supposed to be facilitators. We're supposed to be trainers and facilitators, and we're supposed to be teaching people to do that. We don't have the kind of membership that we used to have. We don't. So the staff is doing more and more. The expectations of live events and the amount of events that we are expected to cover annually and seasonally has only increased. And I think for the most part, we've met all those challenges. But it's it's getting harder and harder all the time. And so we're working on it on our end, but this is why it's really important and really critical for us to have this kind of audience and such a really captive and engaged audience. And I can't thank you both enough.
Well, we're working. Oh, go ahead.
No, I just want to chime in, that Lance and I both were part of the Communications Study Committee back in 2021, to look at how the town could improve communication. And one of the issues that we were dealing with is the lack of a local paper, and news vacuum, right? But we didn't even consider that WinCAM might not exist. And I can't imagine that. The TMMA's mission is to try to increase the flow of information from boards and committees to town meeting, and then to also broaden awareness of town government to the town. And that the recordings of meetings, the public accessibility of those meetings happening is integral to that flow of information. If people miss a meeting or they can't attend a meeting, be able to watch it online or watch the recording. So I can just say personally, and as well as Lance put it with the organization's point of view, that it's essential to the work that we do in town government. But that's just my plug for that.
If I may,
Yeah.
it's sort of part of the problem too and I talked about this, like turning ourselves into more of a fundraising organization. We were perfectly happy to sort of exist in the background, right? We had a steady stream of income. And even though a lot of people don't really understand how we're funded, they assumed
That it's
you
kind
know,
of a
it's
publicly
yeah,
funded
it's
something,
tax
right?
funded, you know what I mean?
Right.
I must pay for that, right? Well, if you're not paying for cable, you're not paying for it, right? Or if you're not
Yeah.
donating, you're not paying for it. But yeah, that's sort of part of the problem is that we need to change our
Paradigm
approach,
shift.
right? And say, hey, we need some help over here.
There's a question in the chat from Amy Poftak on how do we become WinCAM members?
Oh, come down and see me.
Bring your checkbook.
Yeah, right. You can become a member online. The process is not.
wonky.
Yeah, it's not real easy. The best way to do it is to come down and talk to me. I'll give you a tour of the whole facility and we'll chat for a while. Absolutely, please. The more people, the merrier. We do have an online donation spot through Give Lively on our website. It's wincam.org/support us. So you please, hit that up early and often or whenever you can.
If people donate, do they become a member, or does
Yeah.
membership require some level of?
Well,
commitment
yeah,
beyond
the
that?
only real difference of being a member or not being a member is the access to equipment and training, right? You have to be a member in order to take workshops with us and learn how to produce content. If you have no interest in that, you can still be a member or you could just be a donor.
A supporting member.
Yeah,
Financially
absolutely.
supporting member.
But yeah,
You get discounts, like if you wanted to rent the space, you could get a member rate.
that's true. You get a member rate for renting this space,
Mhm.
right? So.
Well, you guys have been very gracious in hosting us and having our board members here, and with our large budget.
Yes.
We have unfortunately not been able to provide you with heavy rental receipts and revenues, but.
That's all
Well,
right.
people donate to
Yeah.
us, we can donate to them. There is another question, I'm not sure we can answer this one, but have any of the current representatives that are vying to replace Senators Jalen and Lewis taken positions on the bill? That's from Rich Rowan.
I don't know, I'm sorry, I can't think of the woman's name. She's a current rep that's sort of the favorite to take over Senator Lewis's seat.
There's Erica, someone.
No.
or
Christine.
Christine Berber.
And Barbara?
No,
No.
Barber is, Jalen's district, the
Right.
lady is
Oh.
Kate.
Lipper Garabedian.
Garabedian.
Yes. I did speak to Rep. Lipper Garabedian at some point. She is supportive of the effort. I don't know about a lot of the other, I don't necessarily know exactly who's running for those seats. Most people, it's very rare to find a legislator who's not a supporter of community media, because many of them utilize the stations to get their own word out, to reach their own constituents, right? So it's sort of an easy pitch. Some of them don't agree with the vehicle, with the way that we're going about it. Or maybe they don't think that it's something that the state should be dealing with. Maybe something, well, it's always been a federal issue, it should be coming from the federal. Maybe that's true, but that's probably not gonna happen, so. The question, the answer is that, we're just constantly reaching out, and, there's only so much that I can do, I speak to my own rep and senator, I live in Salem. So I'm constantly in contact with those folks, and plus I'm always calling the folks from down here in Winchester too. If and when those seats change, and I know they will change at some point, I'll be in contact with those people and I'll give them the same rundown that I gave to all the rest of them.
Okay.
I see Jennifer Heffley wants to unmute. You're still unable to? It was another
Sorry.
question of.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
Dave?
me. Sorry, I'm also just jumping on. Hi, Dave. I saw Mike Day at Town Day, and he said he of course supports WinCAM, and his aide said yes, it's with Ways and Means. And I just wondered if you knew if he was officially a supporter now in the House. Did anything change?
I don't think so. I don't think he's co-signed on it.
Okay.
I mean, the time in the session has sort of passed for that anyway. I don't know. I mean, I think you can. I think you could. But you can have 100% of legislators co-signing on your bill and it's still not a pass. It's not a 100% indicator of the success of the bill. There are different ways that legislators can be supportive. The most important thing for us, and when I say us, I'm using us as everybody here on this call, is to continue to engage with those reps and senators, because the more they hear about it, the more they keep it top of mind, the more they're going to reach out to leadership and to the committees that they need to, and the more those committees hear about it, and the more leadership hears about it. Well, now there's a groundswell. And so it's really it's a question of keeping your thing on the top of the pile, because there are so many other things, as we know.
I think this question came up in the board and precinct chair conversation, but are there statewide organizations like the moderators and the Mass Municipal Association? Have they weighed in on any of this?
We've been trying to get the MMA to what's the word I'm looking for?
Endorse? Support?
Officially endorse, yes, thank you. The bill for many years. They've stopped short of that. They don't oppose it, but they won't come out and endorse it. And I'm not really sure why. We have support from different organizations like the League of Women Voters of Massachusetts. They're very big with us. The Metropolitan Area Planning Council is a member of our team, and it's sort of hard to wrangle folks. It's
Those groups could use public pressure too?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you could always reach out to those groups, you know, if you knew somebody at the MMA, you could reach out and say, hey, what are you hearing about this streaming bill? You know, that Mass Access is pushing, you know? But if I don't have my WinCam, we're gonna have a big problem in Winchester, and here's why, A, B, C, D. You know, you never know who that person knows and who that person is going to talk to, so it really is just a, you know, that's why, again, this opportunity that I have with all of you is important, and I hope that you'll take the ball and run with it.
Yeah, and I think that, I guess I'll, harking back to the communications study, town meeting communications study that we did. What we heard from people fairly clearly was that town hall was not being very effective at communicating with town meeting. Town meeting wasn't very effective at communicating within itself, and neither one of them were terribly effective given the tools they had at communicating with residents who don't know that town meeting exists and don't know that our town government. And one of the things that I've been watching over the last few years is what I'll describe as churning, you know, where we're basically saying we no longer have the Winchester Star, you know. We have Winchester News emerging, we have a bunch of different functions. But colleagues who are out in the marketing world and the political campaigns are also saying they're seeing a world where the channels of communicating with people are very diverse. Some people read only Reddit, some take Facebook, some will, you know, watch only streaming. And one of the, in your earlier slide, you showed your documents group. I think it might be some point worthwhile, I don't know under whose auspices, getting together groups who are interested, certainly the town manager's office and 3 or 4, there's a group of people in town who are very interested in how you communicate and what happens, and maybe out of that, you know, some brainstorming on what are the solutions, what are the approaches, how do we change to match the different current environment. We've gone through that cycle and trying to figure out, well, you know, if we put it up on the website, will people come? Not so many. What about the forum? Well, that peaks a couple of weeks before, you know, before town meeting, and people get excited.
Right.
The bulletin has been one tool we're getting to get out to people in the InfoCast. A lot of folks on tonight have been participating in those as we get there, but it's still this roping around, I think, to figure out what are the appropriate and effective ways, from the purpose of, you know, public education and town meeting and use and things like that. I think it might be something to pursue. I don't think that will be an immediate help to fundraising, but I guess the question is, what are we doing in this day and age to be effective at communicating?
Absolutely.
We've been sort of banging around on that piece for some
Right,
time,
and I
so.
think Winchester News is as well,
Yeah.
and I don't, maybe
Yeah.
Jennifer wants to speak to this, but I think you're right, that would, to find some folks that are that have this as a priority within the community. And I would assume that Winchester News relies pretty heavily on the work of WinCAM to be able to report on some of the town news, so I think they would have a vested interest in making sure that this survives as well. There was one question, I think we also talked about, that you had an imminent potential decision about the move to Parkhurst or not. Do you have an update on that? What would be involved?
board,
If that had to happen, when would it happen? And
it'll be happening soon. The board has given itself a bit of a deadline to make a decision by the middle of June. Right,
and the
so
funding gap, again, to be clear, is there a number that if it magically appeared, would prevent that from having to happen?
our facility related cost per year at this point is about $120,000. So if that magically
If that
appeared,
number magically appeared, the board could vote to stay.
absolutely, yeah. So it's,
We love it here.
we
Yeah,
don't wanna move, you know, let's make that perfectly clear. We don't, we like it here. I don't mind coming to work every day, you know, and building upon what you said just a few minutes ago, we rely so much on public input. We wanna know what you like, what you don't like, and what you'd like to see more of. We don't, you know, cable companies aren't giving us viewer numbers, right? So, you know, if you're out there trying to sell sponsorship, people will say, well, who watches that? Yeah, I can tell you who watched it on YouTube. Yeah, well, so 1,100 people watched that graduation on Friday night. That's pretty good. Well, you know.
I think we've reached our magic hour, or past it a little bit, so. Thank
didn't see any other
you for
questions.
presenting and opening it people. I don't know if we did or not. I didn't think to do it earlier to put, if you want to post, I don't know if you want to make your slides public to people, but,
I'm happy to do it, yeah.
maybe post it somewhere. I'm not quite sure. We stick it in the chat. It's a little late for people to copy those down, but I guess,
We can
the easy thing would be if somebody's interested in getting a copy, to just contact you directly.
Yeah,
by-
anytime,
you know,
davidg@wincam.org.
Yes, and we know how to spell WinCAM, so that's good. And we thank all of the town meeting members and others who have participated in tonight's InfoCast. And as usual, we're open to other ideas. If you'd like to hear more about WinCAM, or if you'd like to hear about other issues, particularly when you're on your summer vacation and want to while your evenings away watching WinCAM or watching a TMMA
Yes,
discussion.
please do.
Okay, with that, I believe we'll call an end to tonight's session, and thank you all very much.
Thank you all for coming.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Yep, bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thanks so much.